Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the Starship Endeavour, trying not to look nervous. He had been working on this ship for 3 years now, but today was different. Today they were meeting aliens for the first time. Real aliens, not just the stories and pictures from the training videos. Commander Lisa Grant stood next to him, checking her uniform for the 3rd time. Kevin Park, the communications officer, was testing his translation device. Dr. Amy Wells, the ship's scientist who studied alien life, was reading through her notes one more time. They all knew how important this meeting was. The Valaxians were coming. Jake had read everything he could find about them. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that changed colors between blue and purple. They looked somewhat like humans, but with special glowing patterns on their bodies. These aliens were famous across the galaxy for being smart and good at making peace between different species. But they were also very easy to offend if you broke their customs. The doors opened with a soft sound. 4 Valaxian beings walked into the room. They moved smoothly, almost like they were floating. The leader was a female named Silvara. At least that was the closest sound humans could make to her real name. Her skin shimmered in the light, and Jake could see the glowing patterns running down her back. They curved around her lower spine in beautiful swirling designs. Silvara spoke first. Her voice had a strange musical quality that made the translator work hard to turn it into English. She greeted them in the formal way that Valaxians used for important meetings. Lisa responded carefully, using the exact words that the diplomacy team had prepared. The first hour went well. Both groups sat around the large table and talked about their worlds, their cultures, their ships. They were careful with every word, making sure not to say anything that might be rude or confusing. Jake mostly stayed quiet, listening and learning, but he kept noticing something strange. Every time Silvara turned around or walked past him, the glowing patterns on her lower back would light up brightly. The colors would swirl and dance, making shapes that seemed to tell a story. It was beautiful. Jake had always been interested in languages, even alien ones. He wondered if these patterns meant something. Were they words? Were they like writing? He found himself watching them, trying to see if there was a pattern he could understand. The patterns changed constantly. Sometimes they were bright blue and green. Other times they shifted to pink and gold. They moved in spirals and waves, creating pictures that appeared and disappeared in seconds. Jake had never seen anything like it. He tried to memorize the patterns to see if the same shapes came back. After about an hour, Jake realized he had been staring again. He had been watching Silvara's back while she was explaining something about Valaxian trade routes. He quickly looked away, feeling embarrassed. But then a few minutes later, she walked past him again and those patterns flared up so brightly that he couldn't help but look. This happened several times. Jake would try to pay attention to the conversation, but then the patterns would catch his eye again. They were just so fascinating. He couldn't stop himself from watching them. Then Silvara stopped talking mid-sentence. She had been discussing something about the space stations near her home planet. But she just stopped. The whole room went quiet. Slowly, very slowly, Silvara turned around. Her large eyes, which were bigger than human eyes and had 3 colors in them instead of 2, stared directly at Jake. The silence felt heavy. Jake could feel everyone looking at him. His heart started beating faster. Had he done something wrong? Had he missed something important in the conversation? Silvara's voice was quiet but clear. "Human," she said. "Why do you keep staring at my butt?" The words hit the room like a bomb. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jake felt his face get hot. Lisa's mouth fell open. Kevin made a choking sound and spilled his water all over the table. Amy dropped her electronic notepad and it clattered loudly on the floor. The other 3 Valaxians became completely still. Their glowing patterns, which had been showing soft, pleasant colors, suddenly went almost dark. Jake remembered from his reading that this meant they were either shocked or angry. Probably both. Jake's mind was racing. What could he say? How could he explain? This was terrible. He might have just destroyed the peace talks between humans and Valaxians. His career was over. Maybe he would be sent back to Earth in disgrace. Maybe they would put him in jail for ruining everything. He opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. His throat felt dry. Finally, he managed to speak. "I apologize," he said, his voice shaking a little. "I did not mean any disrespect. I was not staring at that part of your body. I was looking at the glowing patterns. They are beautiful. I thought they might be some kind of language or communication. I was trying to understand them. Silvara's eyes got narrower. The patterns on her back, the ones Jake had been watching, suddenly turned bright red. They pulsed with an angry light. The other Valaxians looked at each other, their own patterns flickering in ways that seemed worried or upset. You were reading my emotion script? Silvara's voice had changed. It was lower now, and it sounded dangerous. Without asking permission first? Jake did not understand what she meant by emotion script, but he could tell it was bad. He had done something very wrong, but he still did not know exactly what it was. Lisa stepped forward quickly, putting herself between Jake and Silvara. She held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. Ambassador Silvara, she said, speaking carefully and formally. Please believe me when I say that Lieutenant Morrison meant no harm. Humans are creatures who learn by watching. We study body language all the time. He had no way of knowing that your patterns were private. We did not know they were emotional displays. One of the other Valaxians, a male whose name sounded like Corvith, spoke up. His voice was serious. Commander Grant, he said, you must understand. Among our people, the emotion script is the most private thing we have. It shows our true feelings, the things we might never say out loud. To stare at another person's script without their permission is a terrible violation. It is like reading someone's private thoughts. Jake felt sick to his stomach. He had not just made a small mistake. He had done something that was deeply offensive to these aliens. It was like he had been reading Silvara's diary without her knowing, for an entire hour. Jake felt like the walls were closing in on him. The silence in the room was terrible. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Every person in that room, both human and alien, was staring at him. He had ruined everything. The alliance between humans and Valaxians, which had taken months of careful planning, was falling apart because of him. He tried again to explain. Ambassador Silvara, he said, his voice more steady now even though he felt terrible inside. I truly did not know. I promise you I had no idea those patterns were private. I thought they were just part of your appearance, like hair color for humans or eye color, something that everyone could see and that was meant to be seen. Silvara had not moved. She was still staring at him with those large three-colored eyes. The red glow from her back was casting strange shadows in the room. Jake could see Lisa looking worried. Kevin had gone pale. Amy was frozen in place, still not picking up her notepad from the floor. You truly did not know? Silvara asked. Her voice was softer now, but still had that edge to it. Your species does not have emotion script? Amy finally found her voice. She was the scientist, the one who understood alien biology. No, Ambassador, she said quickly. Humans do not have anything like your glowing patterns. We express our emotions in different ways. We use our faces, our voices, the way we move our bodies. But nothing glows. Nothing shows our feelings automatically. Corvith, the male Valaxian, looked surprised. Nothing at all? You have no involuntary displays of emotion? Well, Amy said, thinking carefully. Our faces turn red when we are embarrassed. We might sweat when we are nervous. Our eyes can show if we are sad or happy, but these are small things. They do not show everything we feel, and we can control many of them if we try hard enough. Silvara tilted her head to the side, studying Jake with an intensity that made him even more uncomfortable. The red glow on her back was starting to change. It shifted through several colors quickly, too fast for Jake to follow. Then it settled on a soft golden color that looked much less angry. You could not read what I was displaying? She asked Jake directly. No, Jake admitted. I could only see that the patterns were there. I could see them change colors and make different shapes. But I did not know what any of it meant. I was just curious. I like languages, and I thought maybe your patterns were a kind of language I could learn to read. What did you think the patterns were saying? Silvara asked. She seemed genuinely curious now. Jake felt foolish, but he answered honestly. I did not think they were saying anything specific. I thought maybe they were like art. Or maybe they showed what family you were from. Or maybe they were just decorative. I really had no idea they showed your emotions. The other Valaxians were watching this conversation carefully. Their patterns were all showing different colors now, though Jake still could not tell what any of them meant. He saw blues and greens and purples all swirling slowly. Silvara was quiet for a long moment. Her golden glow shifted to include some blue and green colors. They moved in gentle waves across her back. So for the past hour, she said slowly, you have been watching my emotion script, seeing all the colors and patterns, and understanding none of it? Yes, Jake said simply. There was no point in lying or trying to make it sound better than it was. And then something completely unexpected happened, something that shocked everyone in the room even more than Jake's mistake had. Silvara laughed. It was a beautiful sound, like bells ringing mixed with the sound of wind blowing through trees. It was musical and bright and completely genuine. Her emotion script blazed with gold and white light, the patterns swirling in ways that looked joyful. Oh, by the stars, she said, still laughing. Oh, this is wonderful. Corvith, do you understand what this means? The other Valaxian looked completely confused. Ambassador, I do not understand. He has been watching my emotion script for an entire hour, Silvara said, turning to face her colleague. An entire hour! And he has no idea what it was saying. None at all. Jake felt even more confused. Was she still angry? Was this some kind of Valaxian way of showing anger that looked like happiness to humans? He glanced at Lisa, who looked just as lost as he felt. Silvara turned back to Jake. Her patterns had shifted to a soft pink color now, with spiral designs that seemed almost playful. Human Jake Morrison, she said, and her voice was gentler now. Do you have any idea what colors and patterns I have been displaying since you entered this room? Jake shook his head. No, Ambassador. I have no idea. I have been broadcasting fascination, Silvara said. Curiosity. Interest. She paused, and her patterns got a little brighter, a little more pink. And attraction. The room went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. This was not the shocked, horrified silence from before. This was the awkward, confused silence of people trying to understand what they just heard. Wait, Lisa said carefully. What exactly does that mean? Silvara seemed to choose her words carefully. In my culture, she explained, when someone displays these particular patterns and colors, it means they find another person interesting. It means they would like to know them better. It is an invitation, you might say. An invitation for the other person to notice and to respond. Kevin, who had been quiet since spilling his water, suddenly started to grin. So you were flirting? And Jake had no idea? Silvara made a gesture that might have been the Valaxian version of a shrug. In a way, yes. In my culture, if someone shows positive emotion script toward another person, and that person looks but does not respond, it means one of two things. Either they are rejecting the invitation, or they are too foolish to understand it. I was beginning to think Jake was rejecting me, which is why I finally asked directly. Corvith made a sound that the translator turned into a sigh. This, he said, is exactly why first contact is so difficult. The potential for misunderstanding is enormous. Jake felt like his brain was trying to process too much information at once, so just to make sure I understand, he said slowly. I did not cause a diplomatic disaster? Oh, you absolutely caused a disaster, Silvara said, but her tone was light, almost teasing. Just not the kind you thought. Among my people, failing to respond to clear emotional signals is considered very rude. However, she added, her patterns warming to a nice amber color, since you literally could not understand what I was communicating, I think I can forgive you. Amy had picked up her notepad and was writing furiously. She was muttering something about xenopsychology and nonverbal communication, and how this needed to go in all the textbooks. Lisa still looked like she had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. But Jake found himself smiling despite how absurd and embarrassing this whole situation was. Jake took a deep breath and tried to think of what to say. This whole situation had gone from terrible to strange to somehow almost funny. He looked at Silvara, who was still glowing with those warm amber colors, and decided that honesty was probably the best choice. Ambassador Silvara, he said, I apologize for not responding appropriately to your signals. If I had been able to understand your emotion script, I would have. Well, I'm not sure exactly what I would have done, but I would have acknowledged it somehow. And how do humans typically respond when they are interested in someone? Silvara asked. She tilted her head again in that curious way. Jake was starting to recognize it as a sign that she was genuinely interested in learning something. Usually with words, Jake said. We might smile. We might try to start a conversation. We might compliment the other person. It depends on the situation and the people involved. Silvara's patterns flickered with what might have been amusement. So you hide your true feelings and hope the other person notices subtle hints? Well, when you put it that way, it sounds complicated, Jake admitted. It sounds exhausting, Corvith added. Kevin laughed. It really is, he agreed. Lisa, who had finally recovered from her shock, cleared her throat. Perhaps, she suggested, we should use this as a learning opportunity. This misunderstanding, while awkward, has revealed an important gap in our knowledge of each other. Maybe we should spend some time discussing emotional communication in both our species. Silvara's patterns brightened with what looked like enthusiasm. That is an excellent idea, Commander Grant. This information could be valuable for all future interactions between our peoples. So the diplomatic meeting changed direction completely. Instead of talking about trade agreements and space station coordinates, they started talking about feelings and how to express them. Lisa called for more crew members to join them, people who studied alien cultures and communication. Over the next 2 hours, both groups shared information that was fascinating. The Valaxians explained that their emotion script had evolved millions of years ago, long before they developed spoken language. Back then, their ancestors communicated entirely through the glowing patterns. Even after they learned to speak, the patterns remained. They could not control them. The patterns showed their true feelings whether they wanted them to or not. That is why we value privacy around our emotion script so much, Corvith explained. It reveals everything. If you are angry, everyone knows. If you are sad, everyone knows. If you are lying with your words, your emotion script will show the truth. We cannot hide. The humans found this both amazing and terrifying. Amy was asking all kinds of scientific questions about how the patterns worked, what made them glow, how the Valaxians' brains controlled them. The Valaxians tried to answer, but some of it was just how their bodies worked. They did not think about it any more than humans thought about their hearts beating. Then the humans explained their own way of showing emotions. They talked about facial expressions, about smiling and frowning and raising eyebrows. They explained body language, how someone might cross their arms when defensive or lean forward when interested. They talked about tone of voice, how the same words could mean different things depending on how you said them. The Valaxians found this equally fascinating and confusing. So you can say one thing but mean something completely different? Silvara asked. Sometimes, Jake admitted. We call it sarcasm. Or sometimes people are just being polite when they do not mean it. That sounds very complicated, one of the other Valaxians said. It is, Amy agreed. Humans often misunderstand each other even though we are the same species. We miss cues. We misread intentions. It happens all the time. Throughout all of this, Jake noticed that he and Silvara kept ending up in conversation with each other. While the larger group discussed bigger concepts, the two of them would drift into smaller side conversations. Silvara wanted to know everything about human culture. She asked about music, about art, about literature. She was especially curious about human relationships. So you must rely entirely on words and small physical cues? She asked him at one point. How do you ever know for certain if someone truly likes you? Jake thought about this. Sometimes we do not know, he said honestly. Sometimes we guess wrong. Sometimes we are afraid to say anything because we might be rejected. It is part of being human, I think. The uncertainty. The risk. Silvara's pattern shifted to a deep purple color that seemed thoughtful. That actually sounds quite brave, she said. To express interest in someone without knowing if they feel the same way. Our emotion script makes us vulnerable in a different way. We can never hide our feelings, but at least we always know where we stand with others. There are good things about both systems, Jake said. Your honesty is refreshing. But I think there is something valuable in the human way, too. The excitement of not knowing. The process of gradually learning how someone feels about you. Perhaps, Silvara said. Her patterns warmed to a golden pink shade that Jake was beginning to associate with positive feelings, even if he could not read the exact meaning. But I must tell you something. I find your inability to read emotion script strangely liberating. What do you mean? Jake asked. Because it means I can feel what I feel around you without worrying that you are judging every small change in my patterns. With other Valaxians, they see everything. Every moment of doubt, every flash of nervousness, every shade of emotion. But with you, I have privacy for the first time in my life. I can show all my feelings, and you will only know what I choose to tell you with words. Jake had not thought about it that way. For a species that could never hide their emotions, meeting people who could not read those emotions must be like discovering a new kind of freedom. It was strange to think that his ignorance could be seen as a gift rather than a problem. That is an interesting way to look at it, he said. You humans are interesting in general, Silvara said. You are so fragile compared to many species. You do not have natural weapons or armor. You cannot survive in extreme environments without technology. Your lifespans are short. But you left your planet anyway. You built ships and explored the galaxy. You did all of this knowing how vulnerable you were. That takes a special kind of courage. Jake felt his face get warm at the compliment. We do not think of it as courage, he said. We just think of it as curiosity. We wanted to see what was out there. Curiosity despite danger is the definition of courage, Silvara said. They talked for a while longer, about ships and space and the different planets they had each visited. Jake found that talking to Silvara was easy. She was curious without being pushy. She listened carefully to his answers and asked thoughtful follow-up questions, and knowing that she could not hide her interest made her words feel more genuine somehow. She was not playing games or trying to be mysterious. She was just being herself. As the extended meeting continued, both groups worked together to create new guidelines for future interactions between humans and Valaxians. It was clear that both species needed to understand these differences in communication to avoid more misunderstandings. Lisa led the discussion about creating official protocols. We need clear rules, she said. First, humans should always ask permission before trying to study or interpret Valaxian emotion script. Is that acceptable? Yes, Silvara agreed. That would be respectful. And in return, Valaxians will need to be patient with humans who cannot interpret our displays. We cannot assume that your actions or reactions are based on reading our emotions because you cannot read them. Amy was writing everything down. We should also include this information in all first contact training, she suggested. Both species need to know about these differences before they meet. Agreed, Corvith said. This kind of misunderstanding could have ended very badly. We were fortunate that Ambassador Silvara chose to address it directly, rather than assuming intentional offense. Kevin raised a good point. What about humans who want to learn to read emotion script? Is that possible? Could we learn what the different colors and patterns mean? The Valaxians looked at each other. Their patterns flickered in ways that suggested they were having a silent conversation through their emotion script. Finally, Silvara spoke. It is possible, she said. The basic meanings of colors are universal among Valaxians. Red usually indicates anger or passion. Blue suggests calm or sadness. Gold represents joy or interest. Pink often shows affection or attraction. But the specific patterns are more personal. They are like accents in your spoken languages. Each person has their own style. So someone could learn the basics but not the details, Jake asked. Exactly, Silvara confirmed. You could understand the general emotional state, but not necessarily the subtle nuances, and you would need our permission to study us that closely. The conversation continued, covering various scenarios and potential problems. What if a Valaxian was upset but trying to be diplomatic? What if a human accidentally offended a Valaxian without knowing? What if medical situations required reading emotion script? They worked through each possibility, creating guidelines that would help both species interact safely and respectfully. After several hours, they had a solid framework of rules and recommendations. Everyone was tired but satisfied with the progress they had made. What had started as a potential disaster had turned into a productive cultural exchange. Lisa stood up and stretched. I think we have accomplished more today than we could have hoped for, she said. Thank you all for your patience and willingness to work through this difficult situation. We should thank Lieutenant Morrison, Silvara said, and Jake was surprised to hear his name. His curiosity, while initially concerning, led to this valuable discussion. Sometimes the best learning comes from mistakes. Jake felt embarrassed by the attention, but also relieved that Silvara was not angry with him anymore. I just wish I had asked questions instead of assuming, he said. That is a lesson we can all learn from, Corvith said. Assumptions are dangerous in cross-species relations. Questions are always better. As the Valaxians prepared to return to their own ship, Silvara approached Jake. Lieutenant Morrison, she said formally, though her patterns were showing warm, friendly colors. May I speak with you privately for a moment? Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded her approval. He followed Silvara to a quieter corner of the observation deck, away from the others. Through the large windows he could see the stars and the distant shape of the Valaxian ship. I wanted to apologize, Silvara said once they were alone. My initial question to you was confrontational. I was frustrated because I thought you were giving me mixed signals. I would look, but you would not respond in the ways I expected. But that frustration was based on my own cultural assumptions. I should have realized sooner that you might not understand. You do not need to apologize, Jake said. I should have been more careful. I should have known that staring at anyone, human or alien, could be seen as rude. You were not staring in the way you thought, Silvara said gently. You were observing with curiosity and respect. There is a difference. I was just too caught up in my own expectations to see that. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the stars. Jake could see Silvara's reflection in the window, her pattern cycling through soft colors, mostly golds and pinks with occasional swirls of blue. Can I ask you something? Jake said. You do not have to answer if you do not want to. Of course, Silvara said. What are your patterns saying right now? Since we have established that I cannot read them anyway, would you be willing to translate? Silvara's patterns brightened visibly, and if Jake was reading her face correctly, she looked pleased by his question. They are saying that I find you interesting, she said. That I enjoyed our conversations today. That I am curious about humans in general and you specifically. She paused and her patterns shifted to a deeper pink. And they are saying that I am disappointed our delegations will not have more time together during this visit. Jake smiled. He appreciated her honesty. You know, he said, our ships are both scheduled to dock at the Gateway space station in about 3 weeks. The Endeavor will be there for resupply and crew shore leave. Really? Silvara's patterns danced with obvious delight. My delegation will also be at Gateway Station. We have follow-up diplomatic sessions scheduled there. What a coincidence, Jake said, matching her playful tone. Maybe we could continue these cultural exchange discussions. You know, for the sake of improving human-Valaxian relations. For the sake of diplomacy, Silvara agreed. Her voice had that musical quality that Jake was beginning to find pleasant. Though I must warn you, if we meet again, I will be expecting you to stare at my butt. Jake laughed out loud, and after a moment, Silvara joined him. The sound of their laughter together, human and alien, felt good. It felt like a promise of friendship between their peoples. You know, Jake said when their laughter faded, I think this whole embarrassing incident might actually be the best thing that could have happened for our two species. How so? Silvara asked. Because it forced us to confront our differences head-on, in a situation that was awkward but not dangerous. We learned that we can completely misunderstand each other and still find common ground. We learned that honest mistakes can lead to honest conversations. That is a valuable lesson for any relationship, whether between individuals or entire civilizations. Silvara's pattern settled into a steady, warm gold. You are wise, she said. Wiser than someone who spent an hour accidentally reading my private emotions should be. I try my best, Jake said with a grin. They walked back to join the others. The Valaxian delegation was ready to return to their ship. Formal goodbyes were exchanged, with promises to share the new protocols with both governments. There was a feeling of accomplishment in the air, mixed with relief that everything had worked out. As Silvara prepared to board her shuttle, she turned back to Jake one more time. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, Jake confirmed. After the Valaxian shuttle departed, Jake stood at the observation window and watched it grow smaller in the distance until it finally docked with their main ship. He felt strange. The last few hours had been the most stressful and embarrassing of his life, but also somehow the most rewarding. So, a voice said behind him. Jake turned to find Lisa standing there, arms crossed but with a small smile on her face. That was quite an afternoon. That is one way to describe it, Jake said. You know the entire crew is going to hear about this, right? Lisa said. By tomorrow, every human ship in this sector will know the story. You are going to be famous, Morrison, Jake groaned. Please do not remind me. Look at it this way, Lisa said, her smile getting bigger. You did more for human-Valaxian relations in one afternoon than 6 months of careful negotiations accomplished. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens when we are just being genuinely, awkwardly human. I would have preferred to do it in a less embarrassing way. Jake muttered. Lisa laughed. Embarrassment is temporary, but what you helped create today, those protocols and that understanding, that will last. You should be proud. I accidentally stared at an alien ambassador's glowing butt for an hour, Jake said. That is going to be my legacy. That and helping two species understand each other better, Lisa pointed out. History will remember both parts. Kevin and Amy joined them at the window. Kevin was still grinning. So Jake, he said, are you going to see her again at Gateway Station? Maybe, Jake said, trying to sound casual. We talked about continuing the cultural exchange. Cultural exchange, Kevin repeated, his grin getting wider. Is that what we are calling it? Leave him alone, Amy said, but she was smiling too. I think it is nice. And honestly, having ongoing contact between specific humans and Valaxians will be valuable for research purposes. We learned more today than we have in months of studying reports. See, Lisa said. Even the scientist approves. Jake shook his head but could not help smiling. His friends were teasing him, but it was good-natured. They were not angry or disappointed. If anything, they seemed impressed that he had managed to turn a terrible situation into something positive. The next few days on the Endeavor were strange for Jake. Word had indeed spread about what happened. Everyone knew the story. Some people found it hilarious. Some thought it was romantic. Some were just amazed that he had not caused a war. Jake found himself answering the same questions over and over. What were the Valaxians like? What did Silvara say? Were they really going to meet again? But something else happened too. The incident made people think about how little they really knew about other species. Crew members started asking more questions about alien cultures. They wanted to learn about the differences in communication, about the things they might not understand. The training department started updating their first contact protocols based on what had happened. Jake received an official message from the captain, commending him for his role in improving relations with the Valaxians. He also received a slightly less official message reminding him to be more careful in future diplomatic situations. He took both messages seriously. The 3 weeks until Gateway Station seemed to pass slowly and quickly at the same time. The Endeavor continued its patrol route, stopping at various outposts and space stations. They had a few minor incidents, nothing serious. Jake did his job, participated in his shifts, and tried not to think too much about seeing Silvara again. But he did think about it. He wondered what they would talk about. He wondered if the attraction he had felt during their conversation was real, or just the strangeness of the situation. He wondered if Silvara was thinking about him too, or if she had moved on to more important diplomatic matters. Finally, the Endeavor docked at Gateway Station. It was a massive structure, a hub where dozens of species came together for trade, diplomacy, and rest. The station rotated slowly, creating artificial gravity. Its docking ports could accommodate everything from small shuttles to enormous cargo ships. Jake was not on duty when they arrived. He had 2 days of shore leave, which most crew members used to explore the station, shop at the various markets, or just relax in areas designed for their species. Jake was planning to do all of those things, but he also could not help looking for any sign of the Valaxian delegation. He had been on the station for about 3 hours, wandering through the central marketplace when he saw her. Silvara was standing near a stall that sold crystals from various planets. She was alone, examining a large blue crystal that caught the light beautifully. Her emotion script was showing soft, peaceful colors. Jake hesitated. Should he approach her? What if she was busy? What if she had forgotten about their conversation? But before he could decide, Silvara turned around and her eyes met his across the crowded marketplace. Her patterns flared bright gold immediately, swirling with obvious happiness. She waved at him, a gesture she had clearly learned from studying human customs. Jake smiled and walked over to her. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said warmly. "How wonderful to run into you here." "Ambassador Silvara," Jake replied. "I was hoping I might see you." "Were you?" Her pattern shifted to include some pink along with the gold. "I am pleased to hear that. I've been hoping the same thing." They stood there for a moment, both smiling. Then Silvara gestured to the market around them. "I was exploring the station," she said. "I have never been to Gateway before. Would you like to join me? You could show me the interesting places. I understand humans are very good at finding interesting things." "I would like that," Jake said. They spent the next several hours walking through the station together. Jake showed Silvara the observation deck with the best view of the nearby nebula. They visited the botanical garden, where plants from 100 worlds grew together in a carefully controlled environment. They stopped at various food stalls, where Silvara tried human foods for the first time and Jake tried Valaxian dishes that tasted like nothing he had ever experienced. They talked about everything, Silvara told him about her home planet, about the floating cities that her people built on their vast oceans. Jake told her about Earth, about mountains and forests and the feeling of rain. They discussed music and discovered that both species loved complex harmonies, though they created them in different ways. They talked about their jobs, their hopes, their fears. At one point, they sat together on a bench overlooking the main transit hub of the station. Thousands of beings from dozens of species moved through the area below them, all going about their lives. "This is what I love about space stations like this," Silvara said. "Seeing so many different peoples all in one place, all cooperating despite their differences. It gives you hope," Jake agreed. "If all these different species can work together, maybe there is hope for the galaxy." "Do you think humans and Valaxians will become close allies?" Silvara asked. "I think we have a good start," Jake said. "Thanks in part to one very awkward conversation." Silvara laughed. "Yes, that was certainly memorable. I have told that story several times now. It has become quite popular among my people." "Great," Jake said, but he was smiling. "So I am famous on your planet too? The human who accidentally courted me without knowing it?" "Yes, you are somewhat famous." Her pattern sparkled with amusement. "But I always tell them that you were genuine and honest, that you turned a mistake into an opportunity for learning. My people respect that." "Your people sound wise," Jake said. "We try to be," Silvara said. Then she turned to look at him directly. "Jake, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "If you had known what my emotion script was saying that first day, how would you have responded?" Jake thought about this carefully. "Honestly," he said, "I probably would have been nervous. Maybe too nervous to respond well. Humans often get anxious when they think someone is interested in them. We worry about saying the wrong thing or acting foolish." "And now?" Silvara asked. "Now that you know?" "Now I'm glad I did not know," Jake said, "because it let us talk naturally without all those worries and expectations. It let us become friends first before anything else." Silvara's pattern settled into a warm, steady glow that reminded Jake of sunset. "Friends," she repeated. "I like that word." "I would very much like to be your friend, Jake Morrison." "I would like that too," Jake said. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy go about its business below them. Two beings from different worlds, who had met because of a misunderstanding, who had found connection despite their differences. It felt right somehow. It felt like the beginning of something important, not just for them, but for their peoples as well. Jake thought about the future. He thought about more meetings, more conversations, more opportunities to learn about each other. He thought about the bridge they were building between humans and Valaxians, one awkward moment at a time. And he smiled because sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes a mistake is not really a mistake at all, but the universe's way of pushing you toward where you need to be. The galaxy was big and strange and full of surprises. Jake was looking forward to discovering more of them, preferably with friends like Silvara by his side.